second graders. We just left off at a pretty interesting and kind of a funny part of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We just left off where Violet grabbed the piece of chewing gum from Mr. Wonka and started chewing it, even though Mr. Wonka told her not to do it because it wasn't quite ready yet. And she is the first kid to try this piece of gum that is a meal, a 3-course meal in a piece of gum. So remember, she started chewing, and the first thing she tasted was tomato soup. And then after the tomato soup was over, she started tasting roast beef and a baked potato. And then she got to dessert, which was blueberry pie. And that is where the funny part came in, because all of a sudden, she started turning blue. And Mrs. Beauregard, her mom, started screaming and asking what was happening to her nose. It was turning blue as a blueberry. "It's turning blue!" screamed Mrs. Beauregard. "Your nose is turning blue as a blueberry!" "Your mother is right!" shouted Mr. Beauregard. "Your whole nose has gone purple!" "What do you mean?" said Violet, still chewing away. "Your cheeks!" screamed Mrs. Beauregard. "They're turning blue as well! So is your chin! Your whole face is turning blue!" "Spit that gum out at once!" ordered Mr. Beauregard. "Mercy! Save us!" yelled Mrs. Beauregard. "The girl's going blue and purple all over. Even her hair is changing color. Violet! You're turning violet! Violet! What is happening to you?" "I told you I hadn't got it quite right," sighed Mr. Wonka, shaking his head sadly. "I'll say you haven't!" cried Mrs. Beauregard. "Just look at the girl now!" Everybody was staring at Violet, and what a terrible, peculiar sight she was. Her face and hands and legs and neck, in fact, the skin all over her body, as well as her great big mop of curly hair, had turned a brilliant purplish blue, the color of blueberry juice. "It always goes wrong when we come to the dessert," sighed Mr. Wonka. "It's the blueberry pie that does it. But I'll get it right one day. You wait and see." "Violet!" screamed Mrs. Beauregard. "You're swelling up!" "I feel sick," Violet said. "You're swelling up!" screamed Mrs. Beauregard again. "I feel most peculiar," gasped Violet. "I'm not surprised," said Mr. Beauregard. "Good heavens, girl!" screeched Mrs. Beauregard. "You're blowing up like a balloon!" "Like a blueberry," said Mr. Wonka. "Call a doctor!" shouted Mr. Beauregard. "Prick her with a pin!" said one of the other fathers. "Save her!" cried Mrs. Beauregard, wringing her hands. But there was no saving her now. Her body was swelling up and changing shape at such a rapid rate that within a minute it had turned into nothing less than an enormous, round, blue ball. A gigantic blueberry, in fact. And all that remained of Violet Beauregard herself was a tiny pair of legs and a tiny pair of arms sticking out of the great round fruit, and a little head at the top. "It always happens like that," sighed Mr. Wonka. "I've tried it 20 times in the testing room on 20 Oompa Loompas, and every one of them finished up as a blueberry. It's most annoying. I just can't understand it." And there she is. What would you do if you were there and watching her blow up like a blueberry? "But I don't want a Blueberry for a daughter, yelled Mrs. Beauregard. Put her back to what she was this instant. Mr. Wonka clicked his fingers, and 10 Oompa Loompas appeared immediately at his side. Roll Miss Beauregard into the boat, he said to them, and take her along to the juicing room at once. The juicing room? Cried Mrs. Beauregard. What are they going to do to her there? Squeeze her, said Mr. Wonka. We've got to squeeze the juice out of her immediately. After that, we'll just have to see how she comes out. But don't worry, my dear Mrs. Beauregard. We'll get her repaired if it's the last thing we do. I am sorry about it all. I really am. Already, the 10 Oompa Loompas were rolling the enormous Blueberry across the floor of the inventing room toward the door that led to the Chocolate River, where the boat was waiting. Mr. and Mrs. Beauregard hurried after them. The rest of the party, including little Charlie Bucket and Grandpa Joe, stood absolutely still and watched them. Listen, whispered Charlie. Listen, Grandpa. The Oompa Loompas in the boat. They're starting to sing. The voices, 100 of them, were singing together and came loud and clear into the room. Dear friends, we surely all agree there's almost nothing worse to see than some repulsive little bum who's always chewing gum. It's very near as bad as those who sit around and pick their nose. So please leave us when we say that chewing gum will never pay. The sticky habit's bound to send the chewer to a sticky end. Did any of you ever know a person called Miss Bigelow? This dreadful woman saw no wrong in chewing all day long. She chewed while bathing in the tub. She chewed while dancing at her club. She chewed in church and on the bus. It really was quite ludicrous. And when she couldn't find her gum, she'd chew up on the linoleum. The linoleum is like the floor, the material that your floor is made of. Or anything that happened near a pair of boots, the postman's ear, and other people's clothes, or other people's underclothes. And once she chewed her boyfriend's nose, she went on chewing till at last her chewing muscles grew so fast that from her face her giant chin stuck out just like a violin. For years and years she chewed away, consuming 50 packs a day, until one summer's eve at last a horrid business came to pass. Miss Bigelow went late to bed. For half an hour she lay and read, chewing all the while, like some great clockwork crocodile. At last she put her gum away upon a special little tray, and settled back and went to sleep. She managed this by counting sheep. But now how strange, although she slept, those massive jaws of hers still kept on chewing through the night, even with nothing to bite. They were, you see, in such a groove, they positively had to move. And very grim it was to hear, in pitch darkness, loud and clear, the sleeping woman's great big trap, opening and shutting, snap, snap, snap. Faster and faster, chop, chop, chop. The noise went on, it wouldn't stop. until at last her jaws decide to pause and open extra wide. And with the most tremendous chew, they bit the lady's tongue in two. Ugh, that's terrible. She was chewing in her sleep, her jaws kept chewing, and she bit her tongue in half. Ugh, that's terrible. And that is why we'll try so hard to save Miss Violet Beauregard from suffering an equal fate. She's still quite young, it's not too late. Provided she survives the cure, we hope she does, we can't be sure. And that is the end of that chapter. So we see that Violet Beauregard is on her way to the juicing room, and we'll see what happens to her. Chapter 22 is called Along the Corridor, and we will read that tomorrow. But I just wanted to show you, here are the Oompa Loompas rolling her down the hallway, getting her ready to go to the juicing room. Yikes. All right, bye for now.